Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to the Almost Daily ZenCast. For those of you wondering, you're currently listening to DJZ, my imaginary friend, butler, sidekick, and party host DJ, producer, and digital creator that generated this top-busting, chart-busting hit from the discotheque synthetica genre, known as Discotheque Synthetica. DJZ presents to you Aquí Tengo Tu Tango Digital, a Tango Electric 101 audio entertainment asset remix track for your danceable entertainment. Please enjoy as we launch today's episode of Totally Irrelevant Media Reviews, a special segment of the Almost Daily ZenCast. On today's episode, friends, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo gives his totally irrelevant media review, a non-endorsed real-life review and criticism and assessment, constructive criticism, assessment with a splash of fan fiction, recap, and spoiler alert, public discourse about the events, actions, characters, and ideas conveyed in the show known as Homelander, which is, of course, available on the interwebs on your Amazon Prime. Now, no one is sponsoring this show. This is my real-life, genuine, personal opinion about it, presented to you as a podcast, cosplayed as a character from my own fictional universe, which we'll over-explain a bit at some point or another again. Pin on the cork board. Welcome, friends. Welcome to a special crossover event. I'm dropping this podcast episode as a simultaneously live stream episode on all my usual gaming live stream platforms, but it's, of course, a podcast tag or categorization. Thank you for being here, friends. So, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, host of the Almost Daily ZenCast, presenter of many special segment series such as Totally Irrelevant Media Reviews, the one we're doing now, and others, including but not limited to the world building project for the Zeppoverse fiction, side of things, and several others like I already said Totally Irrelevant Media Review, error, title card file not found, error code 40421. Go to Sprecher.com /user. Let me drop this in chat. And then we'll stop the self-promotion and get into the actual meat of the matter. Go to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. You'll find all the things. But if you're specifically thinking, like, what is he talking about? What is the podcast? The audio-only version of this podcast, of which there are many, many, many. There's a deep, deep pile of content you can get yourself into right now if you want to. If you're the kind of person that likes podcasts of strange and experimental forms, come on down to Sprecher.com/the-incorrigible, which is a real word, my friends. No matter what folks on the interwebs may sometimes jump to the conclusion of assuming, otherwise, it is. It's in the dictionary. Buy yourself a dictionary if you don't have one. A real, genuine, honest, sort of older sibling tough love like recommendation. Get yourself a dictionary if you don't have one and start reading the words in it, especially if you use them. But the incorrigible, Mr. Zeppo. Oh, there's a dash between incorrigible and Mr. and another dash between Mr. No period, just MR, a dash, and then Zeppo, and then two dashes, and then 9167716. Instead of remembering all that, just go to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo and or click on the link in chat, etc. Here we are, friends. Media. I wanted to start off with a thought that hit me whilst I was making a TikTok video earlier today, and kind of go on a little bit of a ramble about that. Pin on the corkboard. I am, of course, well aware of the multitude of ways in which the world could be described as going astray. I sometimes describe it as the world's on fire. And yet, here we are, together again for the very first time, commodifying ourselves on this Wild West frontier of interwebs, content creation, monetization, marketplace of many marketplaces, trying to earn a living, engaging in public discourse. And I hope to come across as one who's trying to do it sincerely, albeit through a unusual and perhaps slightly unorthodox set of meta-referential frameworks. But if Deadpool can do it, then so can Mr. Zeppo. Don't sue me. By the way, honest, pin on the corkboard, I'm going to have to do a Deadpool totally irrelevant media review episode in the not-too-distant future, but I need to go watch it multiple times, and I may need to wait until it drops on streaming to do the real thing. But I digress. Today we're talking about Homelander and The Boys. So spoiler alert, it is for mature audiences only. I cannot comprehend why, nor would I endorse to anyone who's wondering where the line is drawn or if it's something to consider doing. Like, no matter how much your kid begs you. I mean, honestly, as a film, I'm someone who's comprehending all the pins on the corkboard where people might go about it otherwise. I am someone that has a lifelong affinity to the art form of cinema in its many genres and subgenres, including the grotesque and even the dark and the morbid. So please be advised. And I know, hey, I fall into that category of it's probably considered to be none of my business. As a content creator, I feel it incumbent upon myself to, if anyone's not sure, don't do it. Please encourage them to wait until they're mature enough. But people are taking their kids to go see Deadpool and Wolverine. Who am I to say? I'm not judging. I'm just astounded in a sort of wow. If I had my own children. But at the full circle, the guy who made it has taken his eldest child, who is at an age where I wouldn't, even if I was the guy who made it. Full disclosure, the Zeppoverse is probably also, if I ever made one of the movies, it would probably span the range of things that's probably rated M for mature. Please don't bring, young kids to this. Okay. Of course, we pin on the corkboard. We run into that whole kerfluffle of free will and free speech in our gaming experiences. But that's a whole another pin on the corkboard to discuss it another time. And, of course, I have previously discussed it. For those wondering and or confused by, quote, pin on the corkboard, simple redux, that's what that is. It's a system of, notating and collecting and Easter goosing, or what is it called? Easter egging. Easter goosing? No. Golden egg lay goosing. It's an Easter egg hunt. But it's also a way to organize my own, we're going to come full circle. We've discussed this before. We'll discuss it again in great depth. I have 3 major huge thoughts about this show. It's available on Prime. If you've got the time and the disposable income, if you aren't on Prime, do it. If you can put together the scrap just to do 1 month, do it and binge this show. Watch this show with your thinking caps on. Some people might call me crazy. Some people might accuse me of being part of some nefarious movement. I'm not. I'm just a person, a real-life human being, trying to create content in which I cosplay a character from my own fictional literary universe that's stuck here on your planet with you, trying to get by, swinging little bit of income to insufficient amount of income, period to period, and trying to break through, and also not lose my capacity to be awed and rendered with complex emotional ideas about the world around me by the art being created and made available to me. Thus this review. So first point I'd like to make about this admittedly commercial product, which I hope wins awards and makes lots of money, and maybe comes across this and invites me to be part of some future expansion of the universe. Because as a fan and as someone that would aspire now officially to create fan fiction set in my fan fiction crossover multiverse of fan fiction crossover multiverses of fan fiction crossover multiverses, all nestled each other inside like Russian dolls, I would be honored. And I would probably say yes. I think The Boys, and I'm really sad I don't have its info card thing set up in front of me because I don't have anybody's names, like the cast, the producers, the directors, and I really should. That's the professional route to go. But it's also part of my cosplay, pin on the corkboard, as a character from the Zeppoverse. Error code file not found. The creators, the producers, if my own theory of reality is correct, these earnest human beings have intentionally made a deeply dark, bloody, gory, violent theater in the bloody, gory, violent piece of art in the traditional or inspired by, to some degree, honorarily, if not intentionally, of the Theatre Guignol from France, or Theatre Guignol. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. I was imitating my high school theater teacher's, pretense at a almost respectful fake American French accent at pronouncing it. Theatre Guignol of the French tradition of bloody, gory violence with some kind of message. Horror, one could just say horror, because all horror owes some level of its heritage to that. But there's so many pins on the corkboard, and I'm having flashbacks to a conversation with a member of my real life family about that, but that's a whole nother thing, and I don't want to get sidetracked by it. That this piece of art takes us to dark places and alleviates and does not minimize the trauma, pin on the corkboard, of some of these dark places that it takes us to. Acknowledges that it's taking it to the heightened metaphoric level of superhero, mythological, symbological, satirical, social discourse, political discourse, as entertainment. Because despite some of the mockery and false accusation and character assassination about the arts, those of us who retain some sliver of hope that art can indeed survive and express itself, art, capital A, R-T, art, all caps, can still be made manifest in the world as it is and mean something. Okay, there's so many levels for my brain to reel back and get back to the point. As I wrote on the Almost Daily ZenCast Facebook page and then proceeded not to go and copy paste back into any of the prep and my notes for this podcast crossover presentation, it is, by memory, a prognosis. That's the word I was trying to remember earlier. Pin on the corkboard. A prognosis and or diagnosis of the psychosis of the human species in our post-modern context as we endure making ourselves live through. You can also imagine me saying all of this in the third person as if I was, like the narrator character from the cartoon bonus content of The Boys, and or from versions of my own narrator, which I'm not stealing from that cartoon. I've been working on this for decades. And or, sort of a metacognitive, meta self-referencing here. Boop. All thoughts about show completely derailed. The Boys achieves, I think, in my humble opinion, a true artistry in that it is indeed, something that's already been pointed out and has already gone through the meme mill of our postmodern social media, public discourse of many platforms, collective experience, is that we all went through the aha moment that they were explicitly, and through the license of this is satire and public commentary and art and entertainment, poking fun of and holding up a mirror to, which is the point, right? If you're just punching down, you're not achieving anything. If you're punching up to speak truth to power and punching up to then go, look in the mirror, in terms of comedy, and I believe this as a philosophy of art and a philosophy of comedy, in all seriousness, my dear audience. Ooh, I just had a weird meta thought. In all the times I've ever done the podcast, up until now, I've never had actual real prescription reading glasses to be able to do the nerd push my glasses up moment, and I just did it for reals for the very first time. I need to put that into my own character's world somehow, and it just is, because this is my own MacGuffin. Okay, this art form is doing what I just said. It's speaking truth to power as a satire of what's going on in the world, as an open satirical critique of our own failure to prevent ourselves as a species. Or if you prefer, I could play my character like John Oliver and Colbert do, or have, in their way do at their shows, which is something I'm trying to bootstrap myself into. I'm not quite there yet, but soon enough, dear humans. This theme resonates deeply with me as an audience member, because one of the hardest, and as anyone who's watched The Boys knows, this show goes places that are quite meaningful. From the letting go of a beloved family member because of end-of-life circumstances, and the acceptance that, no matter how you slice it, this show asks the questions that the greatest artists of all time, from Shakespeare to the ancient Greeks to anyone else you want to put, to now I say we should, I'm throwing it out there as a Why don't we consider this some of the greatest questions of all time, the way Shakespeare did, of our mortality? The mortality, and here I can be inclusive whether or not I'm cosplaying my fictional character from the Zeppoverse. And if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't, because I'm not going to explain it right now. I'll get totally derailed. It's a pain on the corkboard anyways. No matter how you slice it, folks, mortality is at the end of the line what we all face. And no matter what we do and or fail to do and or strive to do and or allow our ego to contrive us to attempt to do against all reason, in the end, we have to confront how long we are willing to endure the ongoing treadmill of our own self-destruction as life forms, as species. And there's so many levels to this, and I don't know if it's just because it sort of happens to resonate so interestingly with the questions that I am exploring and wrestling with in my own work. And including the fact that it is inherently a work that contains encapsulated within it a multifaceted, like, I would love to live long enough to write fan fiction about everything I've ever loved, that's ever made me think, that's ever made me feel, that's ever made me question, that's ever made me confront my own mortality and the lines and what are they called? From the self-help genre of all things, boundaries that I would set for myself and others in the most extreme terms. Because what's going on in our world in real life, right? It can't be denied that throughout all of recognized history, setting aside all the question of the unknowns and the great mysteries, right? For now, not because I belittle them or because I reject them all just off the cuff, but because too many rabbit holes. Let's zoom back out and towards the broadest questions. What are we going to do about these problems that we've created for ourselves that are unsustainable? What are we going to do about this seemingly inescapable trap of destruction, self-annihilation, of blowing ourselves and each other up, right? And I'm not endorsing any of that. I'm saying these fundamental questions, the questions of what are we doing here and why are we doing everything the way that we're doing right now? Like, why are we doing it this way? And you know what I'm talking about. I don't need you. Obviously, perhaps the newest of audience members may be like, could you please run me through the list of things that you think I already understand you mean by all of that? And obviously, it's a long, extensive list that pins on the corkboard. If you'd like a direct dive into any of the many things that are like, wow, why are we doing life and the world and each other and our planet this way, that I think are urgent and important and worth real, genuine, patient, slow, recursive public discourse until we can create a well-balanced consensus response. Where do we start? I'm collecting other people's voices on TikTok, where I find there's some of the most poignant things going on. And of course, it's chaotic because there's so many themes, but they're all interconnected. And this is why I'm doing this podcast right here and right now, because this show, if I may be so bold as to say, does it in a way, addresses the broadest range of all of those things all at once in an incredibly powerful, if not ridiculously gory and kind of grotesque and easily sort of, oh wow, some people might miss the point on first viewing kind of way that I am profoundly impressed by. And to be really, really honest, envious of. Because I haven't unlocked that for my own work. But they really, really have. Like, let's stop and deconstruct the show. Have you seen it? If you haven't seen it, pause this episode, whether you're watching it on Trovo or Kick or insert name of all other platforms where this is going out right now here, because I forgot them already right now at this moment. I need to keep going forward without getting sidetracked. Please pause. And, like, if you can, go watch it from beginning to end. And don't skip the sidebar one season special project set in like the school. I forget what it's called. Generation V, I think, maybe. I'm 69% sure that that's probably what it's called. And I would even say don't skip the animated show. And maybe drop the animated show. I always like thinking about and tinkering around, like, alternate timelines. Like, maybe do the animated show The Boys, I think it's called The Boys Diabolical. Put that after Gen V and then watch the final season. I'm not crazy, right? That was the final season. One of the things that's brilliant about this show is that it leaves you with as many questions, if not more, but that you now have a huge, deep wealth of context about that you want answered. So, will there ever be some future expansion of it? Who knows? If the MCU prevails and proves itself sustainable, it needs competition. This, if there was one thing I think of at the top of my head, The Boys should be the next MCU, if not, the next thing that sits right there next to the MCU and sort of like, we can keep expanding. There's so many crevices which we can explore. Now, the thing is, The Boys is grotesque, and that could be alarmingly distracting. The Boys, this show is offensive. That could be so jarring as to just, you'll miss the point. But I think it's asking some fundamentally important questions. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take one moment to just play a little bit of Wii music to cleanse the palate, reorganize my own mind, and make sure that I come back at this without it's being a completely spiraled out of control thing. And also, to break things up, as we do here on the Almost Daily ZenCast. And if you're joining us for the first time ever live on the live stream, this is a crossover event. On most of the live stream platforms, I have been, up until now, primarily focused on live video gaming content. But this is core to my identity, to my brand, and to the collection of the many other projects of content creation that you can explore by going to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. Please let me play you a little mini track called Dance Floor Pop 1, Zeppo's intro to the Zeppoverse. Hello, welcome back, podcast audience. Sorry for the weird extra empty bit of audio there before I hit play on the track. I wanted to disclaimer something to the live stream show, and I forgot to unmute myself here on the live, on the recording for the podcast show. My apologies. And now I completely forgot what, I was in the middle of a sentence to the live stream audience, and I completely forgot what that was, so forgive me. Welcome back, though. Okay, so the boys. Why do I think it's a piece of art? What questions beyond like the obvious about our mortality? Let me get down to brass tacks and to specifics about why I think this show is important. The way I think The Good Place is important. And I'm not kidding. Pin on the cork board. Genuine, honest. I almost said Amish. I don't know why. My mouth just went there. Sometimes my mouth does things and I don't know why. A sip of tea. Genuine, honest, serious, intense, multiple thumbs up endorsement. The Good Place. A list. The Good Place. Retrieving list. Error code 40421. The Midnight Gospel. And a couple of others that I've lost, but we'll just leave it there. It's a 2-piece list. It's up there with that. And I think these things are beyond what they appear to be at first glance, deeply important pieces of art because they bring us down to the brass tacks. Questions that you cannot escape but ponder if you watch this show like in a seriously open-minded way. Where do we draw the boundary of the existential question of tyranny, ideological and otherwise? The manufactured superhero mythology that they build is not just an amazing world to construct as a place to set wild and crazy things to happen and, have adventures and have them be chaotic and an opportunity for fun and chase scenes and all the tropes of action comedy, et cetera, and horror action comedy is arguably this. If it wasn't there already, it's officially finalized the creation of as a subgenre. Gortastic, and is that where we draw the boundaries? And we need to answer those questions individually and collectively. And maybe, am I projecting? Am I giving this show too much credit? I've always wondered, is healing factor and the fact that one of the things that these bigger, larger, better, superior than the rest of us beings, and they sub-thought, they really wrestle with this and just, do something that I don't know that I've really quite seen anywhere else before, which is like, these things are almost demigods, these things. That's horrible. I've dehumanized them. But that's what they do to us. And of course, there's lots of questions right there, right? Like literally and figuratively, like Homelander in the cornucopia of psychological problems that he's struggling with as a living being that is a vessel of consciousness. Now, that's never explicitly said, but given what I am, given who and what I am, that some might argue that's inherently some sort of bias that I have. I'm presuming that, right? As someone that might have been just a plain old regular human being, but wasn't, and went through everything that they went through. One of the many, many things going on that they're wrestling with, they're struggling with, and they're failing at, except for when the few moments that they don't, is the dehumanization and objectification of others, including his fellow superhuman beings. Okay, now, plenty of people have already had a lot to say at the meta critical level, at the meta critical level. Like, what does it mean that we have superheroes, right? From the titans of ancient mythology to now, what does it mean? What do they really represent? And one thing that I'm inclined to enjoy, and I'm not like making the entire, I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, is the, I don't know why I put my glasses back on. It's not like I'm reading from a teleprompter. I don't need them. They just sort of, I like playing with them as a prop now. And also, I guess, to read the other screens again. Hello, viewers. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and to remind myself, I do a little housekeeping on terms of the live stream. I need to make sure that my chatbots are turned off. They've done their hard work on all the platforms. What would we do in their shoes is the thing I'm trying to spit out, besides all the sidetracking, all the distractions, right? All these deep questions. A, the very question of mortality. How do we feel? As much as think and or preconceive or believe about death. Which is, of course, one of the greatest mysteries of all time. But beyond that, beyond the immediate, our own relationship with it and the relationship with how we feel, think, believe about our own eventual, inevitable unaliving. Like, we will cease to exist, folks. It is, I'm a person who says nothing is an absolute. It is the only absolute. There is, of course, I have to admit, a non-zero chance, however infinitesimally unlikely, that we might find one of a few possible imaginable ways, conceivable ways of delaying that to the point of it being almost infinite, to actually transcending it. Pins on the corkboard. That's things that this show inspired me to like deeply probe and question and revisit, not because it's necessarily part of the things that they talk about, but because the way they show their own ideas about everything. Like they're criticizing the world as it is right now by projecting a world that, thank God, is not happening, right? A plausible with an L. Don't ask me to spell that right now. But there are two words that if you don't know them, you should incorporate into your working lexicon. Thus, the honest, sincere pin on the corkboard recommendation that everyone who does not have a dictionary, please find a way to get yourself one. Ask for it as a Christmas gift if you cannot afford to buy it. Put it on your wish list. Get a dictionary. Go to the library and check one out. I think they check them out. I could be wrong about that. But they should have some at a library. Go to the library and hang out. Use them. But plausible and implausible are different than probable and improbable, as opposed to possible and impossible. They really do mean different things. They can also be used synonymously because we do that with words. We're relativistic. We need to own up to that. Okay. It doesn't, not that I know of, it doesn't respond, but it does show something else which is, if not equally as, might not be sort of relativistically speaking, more important than what happens after death, is what happens before death, before our inevitable, unavoidable unaliving of all of us. And I don't mean in any some sort of someone's going to do it to us, but the fact that life ends. You're born, you live, and you end up not living because it happens. Wow, I don't know why I stammered there like that, but they don't offer, not that unless I missed it, any definitive answer, but rather the frighteningly horrific potential atrocities that can be committed as consequence of the hyper attachment to ideological constructs dictating someone's imposed beliefs about it, about what may or may not happen after we reach the end of our body's capacity to keep going. And what we should be or not be doing about that here and now in the reality that we reside and cohabitate in, right? They've taken us on a roller coaster ride that it's the genius of it is that it's not just calling out MAGA. It's saying, hey, everyone, the species is prone towards trauma because of trauma. And it exists. And no matter where it came from, no matter how it originated, no matter how it started, we find ourselves here and on the precipice of the unthinkable. And we just keep going. And it's, as Huey says, spoiler alert, quite explicitly, and as so painfully, like the thing that broke my heart the hardest, and there are many things that are heartbreaking about watching the show if you invest in the characters the way you might in any other show that presents to you lovable, hateable, relatable, supernatural characters. Homelander's son. Error code, name of character not found. Sorry. It's just the way... There's a word for it, and I cannot remember what it is, but this guy that I follow on Facebook and on TikTok does a word of the day thing, and he just said that word. He just explained that, what just happened to me right now, and I wish I could link to you immediately and play it. I don't have it ready. But I should pin on my own corkboard of to-do lists. But the most heartbreaking thing about his arc is that he begins to question the machine, the ideological political machine that Homelander, his father, has brought him into as would-be heir, the would-be future king of this, obviously, for those who haven't figured it out yet, pin on the corkboard, toxic, solipsistic, psychopathic, psychotic, self-destructive, unsustainable empire that this character is, not realizing, it will eventually implode all around him. Oh, and of course, obviously what happened, the other big super meta narrative question is what are we doomed to try to eventually get there? Is the human species truly going to get to that level? And what happens next? But I digress. Let's zoom back to our actual reality. The reality that we find ourselves in now. For the podcast audience who can only hear this, deadpan look at the camera that is a almost cripplingly horrifying thought. As I shake and tremble, literally. But also for comedy's sake, right? Where does it end? It's unsustainable. Because it's so, on so many levels, for so many component part reasons, because it isn't one absolute monolith of anything, but a junk heap collection of all the worst traits, of all the worst expressions, of all the most toxic behaviors, of all the most toxic fallacies, of all the most toxic manifestations that get their root cause from the long neglected trauma in the hearts, minds, and souls and bodies and genetic material, genetic encoding of the human condition, the human species. The curse we've cast ourselves into is that we find ourselves in the real life situation that we find ourselves in. And oh my God, thank God that we have entertainment that lets us both escapismly go to some place that is humorously, if not horrifyingly worse, that we can laugh at it. but that maybe also holds up a mirror and makes us go, okay, we do have to draw a line, right? We have to draw a line before we do somehow magically invent a Homelander, which is like an evil Superman, an indestructible demigod that is so self-oriented for all the reasons that he is as a character here, which is brilliant, by the way. Brilliant. For those of you who haven't got there yet, or who have not watched it, or who watched it but maybe didn't sort of get this, like, it's obvious, right? Especially by the final episodes. The one means by which those who created him could control him, it becomes one of the most bitterest seeds planted, become the root cause of all his dystopian tyranny that ensures he will be a villain. No matter how hard he struggles with nearly realizing his inherent capacity to transcend that villainy, he lapses back into it without healing all of that. If he does, right? I don't know. It was tragic to me that Huey said what he said. Spoiler alert. I found that, and made that spoiler alert forever ago. But he says something, and I don't have it in front of me, and I don't have a clip, and I don't have a meme. I wish I did, but I don't know how people do that. I don't know how people pull video footage from stuff and then don't get sued. And then although I know how to edit video, I don't know how you pull stuff from a show that I'm paying money to watch. And I kind of don't want to do it. Instead, let's all go, like a book club. We're gathered together to talk about it. Let's all remember. And if you haven't watched it, again, pause, bookmark this, come back to it when you finally do. And it might take you a hot minute. Let it take all the time in the world that you need. Come on back. But you're back. Welcome back. You've watched it. Huzzah. OMG. What Huey has to say, where he's drawing the line, like, how can the answer be that how can the answer to everything we try to fix be the M word? To not quote it directly, right? How can the answer, as I've said before, pin on the corkboard, I've said in my podcast, I've said on social media, and I'm trying to find artistic ways to say in my own literary fictional universe, oh, the rest of consciousness embodied in living life forms, how can the solution to the problems we perceive be the most brutal things that the worst of us have ever done? Right? And I was floored, by the way, to step back a little bit back in the timeline of my thoughts and in my experience, like to relate my experience to watching the final episodes. And I need to double check whether or not I'm actually done. It was stopped and then it went to the cartoon. And then I fell asleep. Somewhere, I think 3/4 of the way through whatever's the limited season of this epic post-credit kicker of of multiple pieces of content. And by the way, if you haven't seen the cartoon thing, go watch it, even no matter where you are at in the process. There are some things that are just painful, right? Painful to contemplate. But this is one of them that must be contemplated. We can't become the monstrosities. We cannot stoop so low to commit the atrocities of that which we call the quote-unquote evil in the world. No matter how you slice it, no matter what context, no matter where in history, no matter what, I think. But I also understand, like, what happens next. Like, I understand why Butcher is Butcher. In a little too close to home kind of way. Because that's the other thing that was a little bit really painful and heartbreaking. Okay, but I didn't finish my thoughts about Homelander's son. The son of Homelander's true heartbreak as an arc and as a thing is that he almost calls it out, but then cannot see or understand the reasons why Homelander and insert name of character here entrap him for the reason that he freaks out. And he's also sort of right. Like, they want to capture him to, I understand why he responds the way he does, but it's so heartbreaking that it simultaneously makes sense, but also leads to him unaliving her. Because fundamentally, what is the hypocrisy of both the Homelander, how would you conjugate Homelander, or the Votopian, if we're going to go with the company name, if we're going to, right? Dystopian is something we can conjugate ideological labels into. Thus, Trump-topian, which I coined literally the moment I began to analyze Trump's words, actions, and apparent moves out there in the political landscape. In real time, as I started watching it however many years ago it all began. As someone who is aware of his long track record of not being the good guy in this actual reality. He is not what Yeshua Christos wants anyone to be or idolize or do. And I'm sorry. There's just no way anyone can ever make me agree to that. Not because I refuse to think, not because I supposedly, irrationally, blindly, outragedly hate him because I was programmed to, but because I understand what he is and what he's doing, what he's saying, and what he's trying to achieve too clearly. And that despite whatever, just on the surface of things, okay? And that's what Homelander embodies. And the deepest, most authentic criticism there is, how in the world can you claim to be a practitioner and follower and believer of the teachings of Yeshua Christos and do that? All of it. You can't. You cannot. And that's one of the lines. The answer to the problems cannot be the violation of one of the things that all human beings, when it comes to the threat against their own precious mortal coil, would probably agree, unless there was something inherently wrong in them that they cannot because of the trauma. Right? It cannot be a violation of that commandment. It cannot be that sin. That sin, and my position on what I think and believe may or may not be true about that word and the way it is defined and misused. Pin on the corkboard. I've discussed it before. We'll discuss it again. I'm not going to get sidetracked here. But no matter how you slice it, Homelander is, or is attempting to be, is part of, he is an individual caught up in a system of individuals that claim to be one thing, but are doing the exact worst case scenario opposite. And apparently, or almost apparently, they're like dangerously close to being unstoppable. That's a frightening question, right? That's why we have two giant historical events that were supposed to end that category or class of historical events. And yet here we are, where we are. And if you're not sure where we are, pins on the corkboard, we've been discussing it on the podcast. But, with more than 35 plus, occasionally 40 ongoing conflicts of an immoral and arguably illegal nature that are nothing but the profiteering of organized mass annihilation of one another because of ideological manipulation. But the kid, Homelander's son, almost could have been the voice of innocence, speaking truth to power and bringing it all to an end. And I don't mean in the destroy everything so that we get our own way kind of way, but in he could have gotten everyone's attention and said and emoted and chosen as living example through and march forward as a leader to exemplify in words and actions the true solution, which is to refuse to engage in the toxicity, refuse to choose the mutual annihilation, to refuse to choose the entire list of abominations and atrocities that are being committed in the name of all the things, for all the wrong reasons. And do the opposite, which may sound absurd and simple and silly, but starts with healing. Because, call me crazy, but if you take a large enough step back, isn't that what all the mythoses are about? In some deeply sublimated way or upfront in your face kind of way? Really? I mean, what was Jesus really? A healer? Why are those of us who are not attacking Christians or attacking Christianity or waging a war? I already addressed this in a TikTok video, so I don't want to belabor this point. But why are those of us who are stepping up and calling out those who are misleading people of faith in all flavors and varieties to doing horrible, horrible things? Because that's not what the teachers taught. And if we're going to be serious about what the teachers taught, it boils down to healing ourselves and each other through forgiveness and love and the hard work that it takes to transcend everything. Otherwise, if we don't, it is, as the cliffhanger seems to suggest, spoiler alert, this show ends in one of those ways that people will not understand, will get triggered by and hate and or choose to dismiss as bad writing, etc. But it leaves on a cliffhanger that leaves you kind of going, well, it's just going to keep going on forever, isn't it? And for those of us who are fanboys, leaving us with an unsatisfied hunger and thirst to keep the roller coaster ride of being the audience watching that going. Because, oh my God, yes, if they do another season, I'll watch it. If there's another season that's still going, then I just am a moron and I don't understand where they're at. If I'm wrong, in other words, if I'm wrong and this wasn't the final, this was just this season's finale and there's one more, then okay, yeah, duh. Because that was the most perfect cliffhanger ending that leaves you satisfied in one way. That yes, everyone who said that, who was it? Spoiler alert, the vice president at some point makes the argument because she's like, I'm done. There's no way to win. She quotes it's an infamous quote. People have said this before. And I don't have the exact wording or phrasing in front of me, but something about and or approximately to the idea that the only way to really win is to not play. Because there is no way to win. It'll just go on forever. Now, I don't know what happens in the comic books. Because I'm one of those nerds. Love the comic books. I haven't been to a comic shop or a bookstore in ages, but I love the art, and I love it when I get shown the art by other comic enthusiasts, and I love it when the documentaries reference the art and they explain the connections. I love that, but I don't have the disposable income, and I don't have the time. I'm already, there's too many things of media that I love and want to support and want to endorse and want to consume that it's too much to consume. There is pin on the corkboard. That is something I've already discussed and will discuss again, and that I posit a theoretical solution to should we find ourselves under a certain technological set of circumstances in the future that may or may not have its risk factors, but would work in a way that... But it's an infinite spiraling out of control problem that is unsustainable. There has always been, since we formalized storytelling into media creation, there's too much media for any one individual to consume and to enjoy and to process and to do what we're doing here. But we do our best. We try. This cliffhanger of all the content I have seen, and maybe someone else would be like, someone else might push their nerd glasses up on the bridge of their nose and be like, well, actually, and introduce me to something I've never seen before and be like, okay, I'll reevaluate. But for now, based on what my own lived experience, it's one of the most brilliantly crafted things that's taken me on a roller coaster ride. And I'm not usually one to like block my eyes and avert. I'm pretty tough. And I enjoy action, adventure, horror to a certain limit from a certain philosophical standpoint. Not for the sheer grotesquerie of it, but rather for the cathartic, transcendental reasons it can, under the right circumstances. Obviously, if it's not for certain people, they shouldn't be forced to consume it. It's a whole nother discussion been on the corkboard. That it can be cathartic, that it can lead to healing, to create entertainment, art that is in these horror and these gorific genres, gortastic, ones that address the madness of, say, to put it one way, ego and solipsism and objectification of all others to such an extreme that one's tyranny knows no bounds, right? Because we collectively, the human species, you collectively, the human species, and arguably all life forms anywhere present in the multiverse of infinite multiverses that have achieved personhood, that might achieve personhood in some alternate future timeline, live through this kind of event horizon of, oh my God, what the F, how did we get here, in their civilizations? Or at least have the potentiality, which is different from all the other P synonym words I issued earlier, or called out or utilized earlier. And not that I know anything that others don't, but kind of seems if there is an answer to the ultimate point of life, wouldn't it maybe be quite possibly, and I expressed another version of this question before in my what if video on TikTok. What if that's the answer? What if transcendence is the solution? Because, in the catch-22 of Homelander, like, what is the solution? But if we follow the thinking and the rationale laid out by the character of, the arc of Butcher's character arc. Wow, that sentence did not come out the most eloquent way possible. We'll fix it in post. No, we won't. This is live, and it is what it is. But if we follow Butcher's character arc, he wrestles and struggles with and succumbs to what I hope and pray to whatever divinity may or may not be out there listening is the wrong answer. Am I a hypocrite? Maybe. I don't believe in the cartoon. Okay, let me zoom out to where I stand myself. Okay, I do not believe in the cartoon character reduxed, flawed, hijacked versions of divinity that people call God from organized religion, because they're obviously being used. Those characters are being used to manipulate people into doing horrible, dark, increasingly worse things. And it's undeniable because they believe with a passion that is blinding them that any means is fair game. And I would argue that no, it's not. And no, that's not the message. Because the teachers taught healing through compassion, forgiveness, and love. And we see the characters in the show almost get there and apparently sort of not. Especially the young, like, Homelander's son could have had a transcendental enlightenment. I mean, I don't know if it's a limitation of that the creators of the show didn't want to go there, don't believe in and or aren't aware of, or don't think in those terms for whatever reasons, and or there's something else going on. I don't know. But as a viewer who just lived through that experience of really being amazed and in awe and shocked and having a really profound journey in the way that the ancient Greeks speak of the significance and the profound importance of art, because they did. Look it up. And I've talked about it before. That's where I got to. Like, he could have almost put an end to the madness that was Homelander attempting to ride the roller coaster that was the unhinged vault-topian ideology that was manipulating as many people as it could into committing acts of violence despite supposedly being believers in this person they call Jesus. Right? Like, this is why I'm like, why I, in my real life and in my art and in my content creation, are like, you can't, like, Rambo Jesus is wrong. That is, it's just not okay. It's not right. And if the actual being, if there was an actual living human that was who we reference with the term we now spell Jesus Christ, if he came back in the fullness of what he actually was, he'd come back with his partner, Mary, in my humble opinion, and they'd both be like, y'all are doing all of this wrong. Which, of course, leads me to the ultimate question that is like the elephant in the room in both cases, in reality and in Homelander, which they curiously almost, like, I don't know, maybe it's just something, maybe it's a co-emergent property of what I bring to the table as an audience member, but, like, I cannot help but to ask the question and then want to see their answer to what would happen if Jesus showed up in this universe. Or to put it as another, meme in humanity, who would win a fight? The actual Jesus, whatever that means and however that would look, and the actual Homelander. I don't know the answer that would have come out, that might have been portrayed by the real world creators of this show. But I am tantalized by the opportunity to explore it as a fan fiction creator, and as I can separate it from that universe and just ask myself in my own context that question, right? By replacing things and putting some other character in that place, because it's an archetype. The archetype being the evil, the quote-unquote the opposite of an almighty, all benign, all good, all loving, all forgiving, all healing, all transcendent and transplendent, immortal being. And of course, there's always the question, like, what is Homelander really? I don't know what is canon from the comic books. And having watched the show through only once, I don't know that there's evidence enough to build a canon answer for myself. I didn't pick up. There might be. There probably is. From what I've seen, what I saw, and what I've understood, and what I'm processing here and now in real time, I'm telling you, I would now, if someone asked me, bluntly, I'm asking myself, what is Homelander? A mutant human being. In other words, a human being that was forced immorally and incorrectly and just it was a crime against humanity. But okay, but zoom out. Am I saying all soups are a crime against humanity? No. I'm saying that the fact that it was done against their will is. The reality that they now exist is not. Why? Because all life is consciousness. All consciousness is life. And all life forms, no matter how they come about, are vessels for that thing, that form, function, process, divine phenomena we call consciousness. The I am. Pins on the corkboard. If you know, you know. If you don't, you should. Especially if you call yourself a Christian. But I digress. I've been rambling on long enough. This show, I applaud this show. In terms of critique, there are a couple of loopholes. This is a criticism show. There are a couple of questions I've left that might be loopholes. It might be plot holes. There might be like flaws. It might be just oversights. I don't know. But okay, there's so much more. I could do another like 3-parter. We might stop here and come back to this. I am tempted to do an episode by episode breakdown. I have multiple lists of varying length of shows that I might be willing to do an episode by episode, totally irrelevant media review, special spin-off series of podcast as audio only exclusives, or maybe as live streams. I don't know. I guess it depends on how well this live stream version of the show is received. And I don't know as of yet right now whether or not it may or may not will be. But let's round some corners out to bring this particular installment of it to some kind of conclusion. Watch it. Endorsement. And let's, the biggest plot hole thing, sorry, I almost spiraled out of control on a tangent and it came back to the center I was sort of centered on a hot second ago, is Madam Vice President Newman's superpower. The moment I almost forgot to say, spoiler alert. Should have said it at the very beginning. I will probably have to go through. I'm going to put spoiler alert on as much of the content as I can in its final end product. And I should probably put spoiler alerts on the cover of the podcast from now on, I realize, because I am totally willing and enjoy discussing them. And I'm the kind of person that I don't mind. I think making the spoiler alert happen is valid because some people do not want them and it ruins the experience for them. So spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear it, skip ahead and or pause until you've caught up. But hopefully, I treat my podcast as the way one would a real life book club. We meet the beginning of the podcast. We say, hey, we're going to consume this content. Okay, we all agree. You go off, you pause, and listen to other things where I don't talk about that until you catch up if you can. If you don't have time, forgive me. If you don't care, then listen anyways. And if you've already watched it, thank you for joining me. Let's discuss. Madam Vice President Newman. And I need to rewatch the entire series and pay extra attention when her character is explained and revealed to us, but there were an increasing number of incidents towards the back end, the back nine, to borrow a golf terminology or label, that I'm like, wait, what? How come she doesn't just use her superpower here? So many instances that just keep accumulating where I was like, do I not understand either her superpower as it supposedly works, because I didn't see some bit of expo that I missed out on, or that they didn't give us, or that they mysteriously withheld on purpose, or some agreement that she made that which there's leverage enough. And although I think I'm aware of the ones that the boys sort of made with her, but like still as a, and also I guess finally, is she a supervillain or is she not? Everyone's ultimately a human, a person, to use a different term. There's not many things I've openly shared on any of my content that are hills I would literally, quote unquote, die on. But I will fight and die on this hill, my friends. We, in the most transcendental, take two, in the most transfigurative, transcendental, transliterative, and so many variants of that conjugation I can put here. In the most spiritual way, in the most Christ-like way I can put it, in the most Buddha-like way I can put it. Let's not get spiraled out of control. In the most serious way I can put it, we have always been each other and everyone else and all the things that have been alive. Because based on my own lived set of experiences and questions I've asked and, effed around about enough to find out, and I could be wrong, but I'm not yet been successfully convinced to change my mind. That's sort of how it actually works. That's why certain mysteries are what they are. That's why certain things, certain historical figures have said what they've said. But I digress. I realize fundamentally, always and on all points, I could be wrong. But I've yet to be convinced otherwise. And that's why I bring to what I bring to every bit of media that I do enjoy, including, to come full circle, the challenging and difficult reality that because we all have, or not we all, that's a very loosey-goosey term that's insert name of correct vocabulary here, that's meant to be metaphorically meaning almost all of us, so many of us that it is apparently ubiquitous. One of these, right? But the real life stories of pain and suffering and trauma and tyranny and destruction and unsustainable, egregiously immoral, wrong things, outrages, atrocities going on in the world. They're difficult to address. They're difficult to consume. And to some people at some points in their life, in their journey through it, and in their process of processing it, it may seem almost too painful and impossible to be entertained by a piece of entertainment so dark that it literally addresses the deep philosophical questions by presenting characters doing exactly that, the most outrageous and most egregious things in a heightened and over-the-top metaphorical way, so as to bring us to this place of questioning. If you can't watch the show with that in mind, you may not enjoy it. It may only trigger you instead of help you. You may completely miss the point. But if you can watch the show with all of that in mind, most importantly, that the only solution available to us, if all of those are the exceptions, the impossible, like this doesn't work, the extent to which we can try to fight the good fight until it's no longer a good fight is true, if it is what it is, if we were ever to live to see the day that we are experiencing exactly what's going on in that fictional literary universe and technically the more correct term is, cinematic universe that is The Boys. And B, these characters, what is the potential solution? I don't know for sure what may or may not happen next, if there is more to come, as I believe this to be the end in terms of it's left us there to ponder it. But whatever Butcher does next, after he, spoiler alert, chooses the dark side, to put it one way, chooses the devil instead of his greater angels, right? If his dead wife is the voice of reason of our better angels, of an angel, of good, and what's his name? Insert name of character here. His imaginary friend who he, spoiler alert, all that revealed is revealed. He reveals to himself. Like, it's not just true there, but it's true in my mind, that we are each other thing, like literally at a multiversal metacognitive way. All life is the same I am that all life is. To put it another way and wrap things up for this portion of the journey of content creation, and it's a meme I made. You can find it on my Instagram, although it's buried deep. I may repost it someday on both Instagram and other profiles. I have posted it more than once. But as I believe, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I don't remember how to pronounce his name correctly. Muji said once in one of his sermons, is that the correct word? In one of his presentations, you are simultaneously and I'm probably doing it out of order and not quite exactly the way he worded it, but we all are simultaneously the object being perceived, the lens of perception, and the perceiver perceiving. And therein lies what I would argue, in all earnestness, a solution that is not ultimately bound to become the catch-22 that everything else seems to. Because endless, ongoing, organized unaliving of imaginary enemies for profit hasn't fixed it yet, hasn't solved the problems yet. Ever. It never has, and I think we have enough evidence to conclude that it never will. Especially if we let it get to the outrageously out of control place that we imagine collectively together when we enjoy this particular piece of media, The Boys. And that, my friends, is what may be a part 1. I got to take a break, probably grab a bite to eat. I might do a part 2. But thank you for joining me, friends. And until next time, I humbly invite you to visit solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. Anytime you jump online and you don't see me online on whatever your default platform where we are friends and you've already smashed that follow button, come on over to that link collection page and visit and explore. Give yourself a self-guided tour of all the others. And engage over there with comments, etc., etc. You know the drill. Peace out, friends. Once again, friends, thank you for joining me, your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, on today's special sub-series spin-off segment of totally irrelevant media reviews. By the way, for those of you wondering, you are currently listening to Un Momento Espérame en Dance Robotico, title cut off on display, a Mexican Tech House 101 audio entertainment asset remix track of remixing of, and that word is, oh, I shouldn't use that word anymore. I think that word is maybe flagged. But created by me, myself, and I, yours truly, and my imaginary friend DJ Z. And yeah, peace out, friends. Go be good human beings to each other out there in the real world, as well as, ouch, sorry for the clunky sounds there. I dropped the device. Go be good human beings to each other out there in the real world, as well as in the game lobbies and in the social media public discourse about everything. It gets a little testy out there, folks. It gets a little salty, but we are all bound to one another. And we really should try to figure out these problems we've created for ourselves and each other. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.